Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining. We're going to be giving a couple more minutes for people to join, and then we will be starting the presentation. So just hang tight. Thank you. Okay, hi everyone. Thanks for joining the CTGlobal webinar today. What's new in enterprise client management? Today's session will be delivered by Kent Augerland and Jason Sandys. And for those of you who do not know us, we are, for those of you who don't know who we are, CTGlobal is a consultancy based in Copenhagen, Denmark, with additional offices in Norway, Benelux, and the United States. Our consultancy is primarily focused on Microsoft technologies, including cloud, data center, security, and our topic for today, enterprise client management. So please enjoy the presentation. There's going to be time for Q&A in the last 10 minutes of the session. You can also post questions in chat, and we will make sure that they get addressed at the end. Thank you so much.
Well, thanks a lot for the introduction. Allow me to introduce myself. As Kim said, my name is Kent Augerland, and as you can hear from my accent, I'm from the main office in Copenhagen. Enterprise client management or mobility MVP. Been working with client management for about 20 years or so. And with me, almost right next to me, in spirit at least, I have my good colleague, Jason. You want to say a few words?
Yep, thank you. So this is Jason Sandys. I'm also an enterprise client management MVP. I think we're technically enterprise mobility MVPs now, but whatever. We deal with all kinds of things client-wise. Sometimes that even means our wonderful devices. But really, it's kind of one and the same to our end users. So we're going to talk about a little bit more about managing those, right? And so that's hopefully what we'll give to you guys today. Now, one thing to note is if you've heard any of our sessions before, you've probably heard us say some of these things before, maybe a lot of these things before. And that's because they keep coming up over and over and over again. So we may have a few new tidbits in there as well. So even if you've heard a few of these things, we're definitely going to try to make it a little bit new and fresh as well. But it's something that we all have to deal with on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah, and we do love questions, as Kim also said. So please, when not speaking, we will be monitoring the chat window, and we'll make sure that we have plenty of time in the end to address the questions. And if we don't have time to address all of them, we will we'll make the questions and the answers available in a mail coming to you a little later. So let's look at some of the challenges and you know how we can address those. So one of the challenges that we run into a lot is really all the cloud versus on-premise. There are a lot of rumors going on, and a lot of administrators are kind of afraid to make the wrong decision, or they don't want to test out the cloud for various reasons, and so on and so forth. The truth is when you work with Configuration Manager, and those of you who have been working with Config Manager even since the early days of 2012, I mean, we have had cloud integration within Configuration Manager for many, many years now. So we see it with the Cloud Distribution Point, which was introduced in 2012 Service Pack 1, I believe. We see it with all the Windows 10 health attestation. We see integration when we talk about Windows updates. We see it a lot when we talk about infrastructure, and especially when we talk about, servicing all our road warriors. We're going to address that. And lately, we've also seen it when we talk about not OS deployment, but OS enrollment, and there is a big difference between those two. So OS enrollment is what you also know as Windows Autopilot, and I take it that you probably have seen some of the previous Autopilot sessions, or maybe you've even been playing around with that and are kind of looking for a like a mini project where you can test it out internally. We're going to have a look at that as well in here. And Autopilot is, I mean, personally, I do not know anyone who has enrolled, like 12,000 Windows 10 devices. Autopilot is not there yet, but it's definitely something you need to look into because 2018 is going to be the year, I believe, where we will see this being introduced in organizations for real. Then Windows 10 servicing, another challenge. Getting to Windows 10, that was one thing. Now, often what we see is when you do a Windows 7 to Windows 10 migration project, you spend a lot of time and budget and what have you on getting to Windows 10, and then what we have seen is a lot of organizations after that, they completely forget that once you're on Windows 10, well, it's a journey that you have to take over and over again. You don't have to do it, for every Windows 10 version, because as you're evaluating, you should really, make good judgment whether or not you want to, stay on the next version and get current. But you need to have a playbook. You need to have a roadmap. You need to know how you get to the next version, and that includes testing applications again. That includes all of that stuff. Maybe not all of the stuff you did when you went from Windows 7, but still a lot of work has to be put into that. And we see a lot of organizations simply being totally caught by surprise here. They never thought about that. Windows updates. I know Jason is going to talk much about that. He's in love with WSUS, so he's going to spread a little love there. But that's a challenge, and it's like once you fix it, next month another challenge. That's not the entire truth, but that's at least how some of us feel it. Just fix some issues we had in August, September, and then here we are again in January, February, new issues. Another challenge these days is definitely how we deal with the road warriors. We have had older solutions like VPN. There are different flavors of VPN. We have direct access and so on and so forth. Within Config Manager, we have had other internet-based client management solutions, but they're really not up to date, and some of them are not like seamless and super user friendly, and that's what it's all about these days: security and being user friendly. And talking about being user friendly, I mean, if you don't have an easy way to visualize and analyze all of the data that you can get out of an endpoint, then there's really no way that you can tell whether or not you are achieving your Windows 10 goals. And you don't just do a Windows 10 project without first defining the goals. And without visualization, you won't be able to see whether or not you actually meet those goals and business expectations. So those are some of the challenges. And Jason?
Yes, excellent. So that's a picture of Kent, I think maybe about 30 years ago, right, Kent?
Looks at, yeah,
yeah,
slightly.
kind of, sort of. So basically, these are all challenges, right? And in IT, we always have challenges. So it's not something we need to shy away from. We need to embrace them. And at times we're going to complain. At times we're going to whine, right? We all have a little bit of a whiner inside of us. Some people a lot bigger, but at the end of the day, right, we're paid to get things done for our organization. So we have to stop with the whining and the moaning, although you're still going to hear some in this slide deck a little bit later as well too. But we have to take on these challenges. And you know, whether you like some of these things or not, and kind of talking exactly to that first bullet there, right? And Kent alluded to it, the cloud, right? How do we embrace the cloud? Is the cloud really something that's going to kill our jobs? Is it something that everyone has to embrace? And I guess the answer to that last question is definitely no. Right? Microsoft at one point was about, hey, everyone and everything should be in the cloud. And they've really backed off on that because reality hit them right in the face. And organizations told them that, and they realized it as well. However, that doesn't mean that you can't at least investigate the cloud and see how it can potentially supplement what you're doing, right? It's not an all or nothing proposition. And that's one of the big things that Microsoft has backed off on. And so Config Manager, for those of you that are Config Manager admins, this is a perfect example of this, is they've added cloud features to Config Manager in a smart way. They're not saying, hey, we're going to move everything to the cloud. We know that doesn't make sense. We're going to add features to the product that integrate with or use the cloud in a smart way. And you can choose to use these features or not. You don't have to. Are there things that you can, you know, potentially not take advantage of if you don't go to the cloud? Sure, right? You're not going to take advantage of things that are inherently from the cloud. But that doesn't mean you can't get your job done if you're not going to embrace these things. So it's about being smart, choosing these things, choosing to do things in Azure. Now, of course, Config Manager and Microsoft, they're not going to integrate with AWS, but there's, or, you know, any other clouds that may be out there, but there potentially are ways for you to take advantage of that as well. And Intune, of course, is another example as well. A lot of people are, oh, Intune is the successor to Config Manager. It's going to replace Config Manager. And I think that that may be a true statement if we like had some type of, you know, crystal ball and could look 15 years into the future, maybe 20 years into the future. It's not a true statement today. Intune does things differently. It's the whole modern management story of Windows 10, as well as, of course, mobile device management, with which Config Manager doesn't do. So, you know, they're supplementary. You could potentially just use Intune just for your mobile device management, right? Look at things smartly. Don't look at these things as replacements for each other. They have a place, they have a purpose, and you need to sit down and look at those kinds of things. Windows 10 servicing is another kind of example of this. So I have task sequences called out explicitly on this slide because that's a very popular way of doing servicing. The other way of potentially doing servicing is just to roll the feature updates out. And how can you roll the feature updates out? Well, of course, you can use Config Manager, or, and if you're a smaller organization, if you're a born on the cloud organization, or if you're just kind of at the forefront of wanting to do it this way, you can just roll them down from Windows Update from Business and let it come down that way. There's, you know, it's not necessarily a perfect answer for everyone, but it could work really well for you, right? It's not always, you know, a hard choice necessarily, and you could maybe even have just your road warriors go that way, right? Make smart choices. Think about each of these different things. Don't think of them as threatening your job. That's definitely the wrong way of looking at it. Don't think of them as, oh, all this work I have to do to get these things done. Just look at them. Maybe they'll save you work in the long run, right? So if you're a smaller organization and you're dealing with the pain of Windows updates every month, maybe Windows Updates for Business, which is just coming from Microsoft, which just works on whatever the number is, right? 300 million consumer devices, whatever that number is. It just more or less works there. Maybe that's right for your organization as well, right? Don't discount these things. And me saying that for folks that know, that's a really big concession for me to make because I'm obviously a diehard Config Manager person. And that of course goes into Windows updates. You know, we're going to bash on Windows updates a little bit, unfortunately. So you just kind of have to realize that there's maintenance, right? We have jobs. Our jobs aren't just to sit and monitor things and everything's going to be happy, right? If that were the case, we probably wouldn't have jobs. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. More cloud stuff, right? You can see the word cloud there. Co-management is effectively cloud or integrating cloud in a smart way. So Ken's going to actually show a lot of that, and we're going to talk about that as well. And then finally, we're going to show one of our offerings that's gained a lot of traction. It's a cloud offering, but it's not really you implementing anything in the cloud. It's really just a way for you to visualize your data. So these are all ways for you to take on those challenges that we all have in all of our organizations on a day-to-day basis, right? And once again, right, be smart about it. Make informed choices. Don't make knee-jerk reaction choices. So that's one of the intents here, is to try to give you guys as much information to make that smart, informed choice as we can.
Yeah. So the question is not really, is the cloud our enemy or friend? I mean, the cloud is here, and as Jason is saying, just be smart about it. And we are using, I mean, especially those of you on Config Manager Current Branch, you're using the cloud integration we have in there probably big time. Now let me just jump in here to a quick little demo and see what we have, and I'll just pause a little bit because I know that the WAN connection, different places around the world. I'll take a few seconds for the screen to refresh here. But this is this is kind of the scenario that Jason just talked about. We want to do some co-management, and what I'm about to start right now is me ordering a device from Lenovo, HP, one of the autopilot vendors, and then this is just me booting up. The only thing I really have to do myself is figuring out what region I'm in. So I'll just go ahead and select United States, which is absolutely not correct at the moment, but I'll do that anyway. Select my keyboard. So that's US. So this is, and then I'll skip adding a second keyboard. The next thing I will do is I'll just go in and type in my email address. Now this is in a demo environment, so my email address here is not really my email address. But what will happen when I do that is my device here will go ahead and communicate with my Azure tenant, and it will figure out that oh gee, this one here won't. It will figure out that it's associated with my tenant, and then it will just be joined that way. So when I go in here and I just set this one up here. So just go ahead and sign in. So I'm signing in with the official Microsoft things here. Then I will enter my super secret password for Julie. And as you can see here, it has already recognized me. Hey, welcome to CTGlobal Academy. And now what will happen right now in the background, and we're not going to sit around and wait for that here, is that it will be enrolled into Azure AD. It will be enrolled into Intune. And one of the things that Jason mentioned was the whole co-management thing here. So what will happen is, as part of my enrollment, I will get a Windows an SCCM client installed. And then in SCCM, what I've configured here is I've configured co-management. Now, co-management will allow my Windows 10 client here to be managed by both Intune and SCCM at the exact same time. Obviously, having my client, receive Windows update policies from both sources and trying to apply both policies wouldn't work out very well. So what we have in here is we have a workload tab. And in this workload tab here, I can go in and say, okay, so what kind of workloads do I want Intune to manage, and which workloads do I want Config Manager to manage? And at this point here, the latest SCCM version, I have 4 workloads. Endpoint protection was just added, and endpoint protection is, one of the workloads that I think you alluded to, Jason, where you said, well, why do I really want to? Why do I care about this? Everybody should just receive, definition updates, engine updates, and all of that good stuff. I don't need to sit in here and control that. And the same goes for my compliance policies and my resource access policies, certificate enrollments and mail enrollments and so on and so forth. It's something we're doing in Azure anyway. I don't need to do this within Config Manager, but what I'm still not really ready to, as of right now, is to go in and say, hey, I want to do every Windows update policy from within Intune, because we might have some a lot of service windows, we might have some processes and so on and so forth. But at one point, I will get out of chicken mode, and then I will say, okay, so now at least let me try and do this for my pilot group, and then my pilot group will now apply the policies coming from Intune, so I can learn, and I can learn for as long as I want to learn. And sometimes when we're dealing with Windows updates, that learning period there, 1 month is not enough. It has to be, maybe a quarter or maybe even half a year. But that's the cool thing. I mean, you have all the time in the world here. So what happens in the background on the other machine there is that my machine will be enrolled, as I mentioned, into Intune. One of the things I have in Intune is that I have an application that will go ahead and install my Config Manager client, because Config Manager, the agent, is not a natural part of your Windows 10. So within Azure and within Intune, if I just jump to that, see here, if I go into my dashboard, so here I'm in already signed in to Intune, and when I look at my my mobile apps here, then in this tenant, I only have 2 applications, and the one application being my Configuration Manager client. This is the MSI file. The MSI file that some of you might already have been using many times when you're creating a GPO back in the days when you wanted to do that install. Now we probably don't do a GPO install any longer unless we're using Jason Sandy's startup scripts. But here I have my properties. So this is my application CCM setup MSI. And when I look in configure here, this is really where all the magic lies. So just assign it a name, a description, and if you're familiar with deploying MSI applications from Config Manager, I mean, you'll find this super easy to do. There's not, the same rich feature set as we have in Config Manager, but for an MSI application, often you don't need that much. And then I have my command line arguments, and this is where all the magic lies, because here what I'm saying is I'm telling my right now my internet-based client that, hey, go to this cloud management gateway. This will be your gateway into my on-premise environment, and from here you'll start downloading the application, and the application being the Configuration Manager application, and go ahead and install that. So once that is installed, I'll start getting all the other apps, so compliance policies and all of that good stuff that you're used to from within SCCM. And my device here, which is like my physical device here, this device is a Surface Book, and it is co-managed. So when I'm opening up my Configuration Manager properties here, you can see that co-managed capabilities is 39. 39 is a nice number, but it's kind of indicating what features and workloads are enabled, and I can see that co-management here is enabled, and I'm sitting in our office, so I'm currently on the intranet. So when I'm moving, to my house, this one here will automatically go to the internet, but as a Config Manager user, I'm unable to tell the difference because it all happens seamlessly in the background. So being able to be co-managed kind of builds a bridge between what we know and what we have known for the last many years, and then the new world that Jason was talking about. I'll get back to my enrollment a little later on here. It will take a little while. So back to the slides here. And Back to you, Jason.
All righty. So lots of good pieces in there, right? It's something to explore. It's something to play with. It's something that maybe in the long run replaces OSD for folks, right? In the meantime, though, we still have to deal with deploying Windows 10. And yesterday, was it yesterday? No, 2 days ago, 1803 went GA, right? So I don't know how many of you have done it at home or have even started playing around with it at work. I have not. I unfortunately don't have tons of time always to do that kind of stuff, but it's something we need to start thinking about. It's also, and I haven't counted what the 6th release of Windows 10, which is kind of interesting. And I'm totally guessing offhand right now 6, but it's somewhere in that. It might be 5 or 7. But one of the questions we get from customers a lot is, hey, how are other organizations deploying each version of Windows 10? And really the answer right now is, well, they're not. They've pretty much deployed one and they've been happy with it so far and haven't wanted to go through any of the work to do those kinds of things again, because there's a fair amount of work involved, right? Whether you like it or not, there really is in most enterprise organizations. Some folks have been great. They can deploy the feature update. They have all modern systems in their environment. All the drivers from their vendors are good. Maybe they only have 1 or 2 models, and maybe you can get away with that. That's definitely the intent for Microsoft, right? Once again, right, it's that consumer model. Let's just deploy it out there to our 200, 300 million devices. It's going to work in 99% of the cases or whatever percentage it is. And they want to have that replicated in the enterprise. Unfortunately, in the enterprise, there's all kinds of wonderful complications, right, that they have to start dealing with. And the list on the left there is probably just a subset. I'm sure there are other things that folks can think of. But you have to do other things in the enterprise, right? Most enterprises are a little more risk averse than folks are at home. And at home, right, if something happens, you really don't have a ton of recourse. So that's, but in an enterprise environment, right, you're gonna go yell at the IT guys if something happened to your stuff. So you've got to go through these pains of getting all of these things ready. Hopefully in the future, it won't be that big of a deal. But you know, at the same time, we still got people on Windows 7. Current customer I'm at right now, we're starting that rollout right now. We're a little bit, when we've got some buffer, right? Windows 7 doesn't go out of support for just under 2 years now, so there's still some buffer time for these guys. But just like XP, there are going to be folks that, hey, you know, it's going to be December of 2019 and they're not off yet, right? And they're going to be scrambling and trying to figure out exactly what they want to do. And then, of course, January is going to roll around and they're really not going to know what to do at that point in time, just like XP once again. So this is a big step. You've got to make sure that you get these kinds of things right. This is going to be an ongoing challenge. We don't really have anything explicit to show here. I will say it's really a lot about testing. So once again, at my current customer, my main experience right now is watching the progress bar. And there often is. Anyone who's done operating system deployment, that's one of our main activities, right? We watch the progress bar go, and then an error happens an hour into whatever we're deploying, and we go fix it, and we wait another hour, right? But that's why it's so important to get these things right, because particularly if you're dealing with in-place upgrades when we're doing our servicing piece, you've got to do all of these testing pieces. You've got to make sure your applications are in line, right? Nobody has time to test all of their applications. And so it's important to enlist users that have those important line of business applications. You have some front runners that actually go out and install these things first, so that you know that their applications are going to work and that you're not going to actually kill their systems. Another piece in this, and a lot of IT organizations kind of forget about this one, is, hey, we got to get our support staff trained on this stuff, right? 1803's got new features in it. It's got new applications in it. It's got new little twists and nuances in it, just like every version of Windows 10 has. Is our support staff ready for that? Maybe, maybe not. Users is another thing. So once again, going back to my current customer, because these things are fresh in my mind, we've got this room, they call it the war room, all these systems in it, all these different models in it. And every now and then, just a random user will walk in that got sent to come in and just do some testing, and they've got a script that they run through. And they find little things that you'd never think of, right? Like, it says this, but I don't really see that. And you're like, oh yeah, you know, we take it for granted that that means this, but it really means this, right? And so having that kind of testing, that user level testing, so that you know, so that now you can send those notes out to the rest of your users, right? And so that they know that, hey, look, the start menu looks different than Windows 7. And, you know, these things are pinned to the taskbar. There's all kinds of little things that in IT we take for granted. So, and you only get there through testing. So big stress testing. Go ahead, Kent.
Yeah, just because I've actually had some time in the office today, so it's not really one of the demos that we agreed on, but if you feel like it, I'll be happy to kind of share what we are doing here internally with the upcoming release 1803. So I just want to see here just a quick little thing here. Let me just go back in and change this value here. So as you were saying, Jason, one of the bigger challenges here is, you know, getting everything out and making sure that, you know, everything is ready, especially content. We are still distributing a ton of content here, and I still encourage you all to, you know, go ahead and look at some of the content features that we have within Configuration Manager, and if they don't suit you, you know, all the delivery optimization, the branch caching, or what have you, then, you know, take some time and test out some of the alternate content providers that we have out there. So we have some different companies, like, for instance, 2Pint that are also sharing a lot of great features. Now, one of the things that we ran into, you know, not that long ago was, you know, people, when they're seeing the standard task sequence and they're seeing the standard config manager interface, they go all, what on earth is going on? You know, I'm in sales. I have no idea why you're showing me this. I'm never ever going to understand what you're saying, so I'm never going to start that setup. What we have done is, and I've seen some other really cool examples out there, but now I'm just going to kind of show the little example we have here. So I have, and all depending on my registry settings here. So hopefully, yeah, there you go. I don't know if you can all see this, but here it says, well, Kent, Windows update is required. It's a mandatory security update. That's text that we are controlling. It will take about 2 hours. Well, now is probably not a good idea for me to do that, as I'm in a presentation. So I'm going to go ahead and schedule a reminder here. So we have our little logo up here, and I can see, you know, I can defer this up to X number of times. 9 of September is, you know, after that I cannot defer it anymore. And if I do that, you know, I won't be able to play Candy Crush, which is like, oh. So I'm going to set a reminder. I'm going to set a reminder for Friday, and then probably not 5 a.m. but 5 p.m. and then just go ahead and confirm that. If I click on Run Checks here, then we can add in a lot of custom checks, and one of the checks would be, you know, as you probably know also from other tools like UI++, where you can see if we're running on battery. We can also check and see if, you know, if the content is downloaded. Probably not in the UI, but before showing the UI, I should probably somewhere within Configuration Manager, you know, figure out if all the content is downloaded. Because if you show me a Windows upgrade notification and I click, yep, I have 2 hours now and it's going to take 8 hours to download the content, I'm not going to be a happy end user. On the contrary, I'm going to be, you know, as mad as I can get because of this bad experience. So when you're planning all of this, you know, content is important. Don't show anything to the end user until you're really sure that the device is really ready to go ahead and do the upgrade. So this is, as I said, didn't really plan this, but I was just, you know, playing around with that today. So I was thinking maybe just go ahead and show it. And Jason, you're...
Yep. So these are my real feelings on WSUS. So we're taking a kind of hard left turn here, but we kind of alluded to this before, and you guys kind of saw a quick preview of that before. Kent mentioned this before as well. Every month it seems like there's something new with WSUS, and we can all lament and we can complain and we can, whatever, bitch and moan if I'm allowed to say that. But at the end of the day, we still have to use it. When it works well, but we have to do some things to make sure that it works well. Can you go to the next slide, please? There we go. Basically, this is all about, and actually the animation's coming through, I'm surprised. So, but it's all about the WSUS catalog, right? And for those of you who don't know that scene, it's from the 2 greatest movies ever. So hopefully you go look those up. But basically the WSUS catalog is getting bigger and bigger, and it's ready to explode basically. And that's really all of our problems come down to that. Folks at Microsoft seem to like to cram new things into the WSUS catalog. And things like cumulative updates, it seems like, okay, we add one piece of metadata to the WSUS catalog for a cumulative update. That's not a true statement though. There's tons of metadata that goes into the catalog for each cumulative update. And when we talk metadata, we're talking things like download links, we're talking informational, but we're also talking about detection methods. And so the detection methods for the cumulative update are really crazy big, unfortunately. And so one cumulative update can balloon the WSUS catalog greatly, and it's really unfortunate. Go ahead into the next slide. So these are my kind of canned responses. Is how do we handle with these things? The last 2, you probably have seen all of the things at the top. There's links in this slide deck. We'll send out the links, but this is like a canned answer I have in the forums. Have you done these things? And then there's a bunch of reference links as well. But the 2 ones at the bottom are relatively new, the version next updates. So this is kind of someone at Microsoft deciding, hey, we're going to put some version next updates into the WSUS catalog. I don't understand the rationale there, but once again, right, we got to move past kind of complaining about it and just fix it. And so these updates have huge amounts of metadata. So now when we're talking about the WSUS catalog getting big, remember where the WSUS catalog has to go. It has to go to every one of our clients so they can scan for compliance. And it all goes through where? It goes through IIS on our software update point in the config manager world. Well, great. Now, what happens if I have 10,000 clients that all of a sudden need to get all of this brand new metadata, and they all just start happening to scan every day, whatever our scan schedule happens to be set at? Well, that's probably going to be a bottleneck, right? And if our IIS server is not configured well enough to have that, then we're going to actually have the IIS server stop. And then all those clients that were in the middle of scanning will have to start scanning again. And we just have this big snowball rolling down the hill. And so it's all about that catalog. We got to cull that catalog. So that's where the declining those updates go. Declining superseded updates. One thing that's not on here, declining Itanium updates. So there are scripts out there that will do this for you. You can go directly into the WSUS console and decline these updates as well. And basically declining an update gets it out of the catalog so the clients won't see it anymore. The other one, and this one just came out last week, I think, it was a KB that came out, is the Windows Analytics client, right? So Windows Analytics is used for upgrade readiness, Windows 10 upgrade readiness. An older version of the client, for whatever reason, expires a portion of the Windows Update cache, Windows Update agent cache on the local systems. So that cache contains the catalog, right? The catalog that client previously downloaded, so that it doesn't have to re-download the entire catalog every single time. Well, it expires part of it now. Don't know all the mechanisms behind it, but that's what's going on. So what happens? So all of our clients now that have the Windows Analytics agent running on them, some of their metadata is now expired, which means they have to go re-download it again. So that just continues to contribute to our issue. And now WSUS is going to fail. If we don't have WSUS, we don't get compliance, and we don't get arguably the most important thing that we do in client management, and that's keeping our systems up to date with Windows updates. So really painful. I think you guys have seen me demo some of the other stuff before, so in the interest of time, I think there's some cooler stuff after this to view. We can always go look at those at different times. But the links, like I said, are in the deck. These are all referenced in there and how to do all of these things. So this is a great list. If you haven't done any of these things, definitely go do them, because you will. If you haven't seen an issue with your WSUS, you're very lucky. And so we're talking really WSUS in a config manager context. You're super lucky if that hasn't happened, and I really doubt it. But if you haven't, you will at some point, because the catalog just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger if you're a Dr. Seuss fan, and that's really unfortunate, the trend. Okay,
so,
cooler demos coming up.
Yeah, so just want to share one thing here, because as you said, Jay, we are going to share all the all the links that you have. But one of the things you mentioned was that if you haven't had any issues yet, you're probably just super lucky, or maybe you didn't really look into that. So we have one of the reports that I've started using lately here is a custom report that we have, but this one here will basically tell me all of the issues that I have had. Now, this is just a small environment, so when running this against a client with 15,000 devices, I'm getting a lot of interesting scan errors down here, and each of these scan errors here are kind of translated into something that is, makes sense to the administrator. So this is probably the issue, and this is, how you can go ahead and fix this. But this is, I mean, if you don't have this insight, as Jason is saying, then it's really hard to do anything about it. Obviously, you have to do all the stuff that was on the slide, but still, you still need to go in and check once in a while. Yeah. Should we go back to the deck here?
Yep. So, and Kent talked about this one a lot, so we won't go into too much as far as these go, but some important things for road warriors. Most organizations have them, and this kind of goes back to WSUS, right? The first one, software updates. That's what people want for their road warriors. I have a blog post there. You can see a link there on how do we handle road warriors. A lot of folks still haven't come to terms with how they're going to handle road warriors. So there's native ways in Config Manager. You can use your traditional VPN, right? So the next slide has a traditional VPN. I don't think we really need to show the graphic. You can click through it real quick. We'll stay on it 10 seconds. I think everyone should be familiar, right? VPNs have their downsides though. Users have to initiate them, right? They're not always on. There is a new always on VPN technology in Windows 10 that you can take advantage of. But there's still some idiosyncrasies there. It's still coming through your on-premise network. That's potentially a pain point for the security guys. And right, they're coming into your network to get updated, but now maybe if they're not updated, there's a security risk there. So lots of painful pieces with VPN. It works and it can work, but it's usually not the best solution. So within Config Manager, we have a native solution, internet-based client management. There's some pain with IBCM because you're adding infrastructure, you're adding PKI, you're adding some other pieces like that as well. So it works as well. There's nothing wrong with it. If you don't want to embrace the cloud, this is still a great solution, but you've still got all of these clients coming in through your internet connection. So security risk, network traffic flow, lots of things like that. So how can we start embracing the cloud? That's really kind of one of the main themes here as well. So one of the pieces they added was the Cloud Management Gateway. Great, right? Let's host this in Azure. This is an Azure only thing, so not going to happen in AWS. You could potentially do the IBCM scenario in AWS, but all you've done is kind of shifted where those things are at. With the CMG, you're not adding any infrastructure to your on-prem environment. Have the CMG and the Cloud DP there pictured as servers. They're virtual servers. They're really treated as services. You're not having to manage these in any way. They just get spun up for you. If you don't want to know that they're there, you don't have to know that they're there. And of course, it leverages Microsoft Update as well for downloading binary files, right? We don't have to download updates from anywhere. What the actual binary files themselves, why download them from your network or even some special place like your Cloud DP? Why not? They're already sitting there for us to grab. And so that's why Microsoft Update is a part of this picture. So if you look, right, the little pink box or peach box, whatever you want to call it, we really haven't added any infrastructure. Those could be the same server if you're a smaller environment, just have a single config manager server, site server sitting there. They could be multiple depending upon your infrastructure, but you don't have to add any infrastructure explicitly for a cloud management gateway, right? It just works out of the box, and all of these things just get spun up in Azure, and you get a small bill at the end of the month. Small could be relative, just depends upon how much you're using it. And so there's something that, it's a whole separate tangent, but at the end of the day, that's usually a great trade-off. Because the other thing I mentioned on the other slides is, right, none of this traffic from the clients themselves is coming into your on-prem network. It's a secure connection. It's a proxied connection simply between Azure and your on-prem network. It's not all of the clients. You don't have anything technically internet facing at this point in time because your CMG is the one who's initiating that connection. right? A lot more secure, a lot easier to stand up. If you've done this before, if you're familiar with it, because there's always little idiosyncrasies and little things to know about. But if you're familiar with it, you could do this in under a day. Probably in under 4 hours, you can get this spun up in your organization and have your clients all of a sudden just start talking, right? There's a couple requirements. There's potentially a PKI requirement here as well, unless you started Azure AD domain joining your systems. Always caveats, right? There's so much, with flexibility comes complexity. And the next scenario is the co-management scenario that Kent talked about.
Yeah.
We haven't changed a whole lot. Go ahead.
No, so the only thing here is, as you said here, I just go into within Configuration Manager and I say, well, I want to switch. I want to share the workloads between Intune and Configuration Manager. I mentioned co-management. You do not need CMG to be co-managed. That's not a requirement. It is a requirement if I do the autopilot stuff that I did in the beginning. But this cloud management gateway is technically not a requirement at this point here. Now, in the I did quickly show the CMG. I didn't really show the autopilot stuff, and there was a really good reason for that. So one of the things that I completely forgot to do, and making a mistake in an online demo, that's always okay, as long as you can explain why you're making that mistake. So when I enrolled my device, I actually didn't do an autopilot enrollment. Well, if you've never seen it before, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference, but those of you who have seen it, you go like, Kent, you're lying. So what I forgot to do is within my device enrollment here, I have Windows enrollment, and I'm back in Intune. I have associated my device here, my autopilot device. So here I have my my hardware number, my hardware ID, and as you can see here, it's not really assigned to anything. That's just me being super lazy. I got my device imported, but I didn't assign it a profile. And when I don't assign it a profile, it means the end user has to go in and do all the hard work, like accepting the end user policies and so on and so forth. So here, if I go in and assign it a profile, the end user doesn't have to do that. So you still have to select the keyboard layout, but do not have to do any of the other stuff. And I haven't checked on the device since I left it. So we can, just as a final thing here, well, looks like we're here. So here I have Julie. And at least I do have a Windows 10 device here. And it will just, if we have an MFA policy, we'll just start up with that. So I have to go in and sign in with my my phone and stuff like that. But after that, I'll just get my desktop, and we can deploy a standard Windows 10 desktop. I will get my Office 365. I will get my Config Manager client, and so on and so forth. We will just leave it here, and then if you want to see what it looks like, because I did do it earlier on today, then I have the very same user here, and here the user went through the very same experience. So here, when looking, I just created the shortcut to the Config Manager icon here, but you will see this one here it says currently internet, co-management is enabled, and I can see the capabilities here. So this is kind of the end result, but as Jason said, in the interest of time here. Now, one of the things that Jason mentioned was when we spoke about updating Windows 10 was the whole driver stuff. And one of the things that we have seen is that if you don't take care of your drivers, then you will potentially run into issues like you'll see an increase in your blue screens. You'll see an increase in your application crashes, because even though it is a new Windows 10 version, it's a Windows 10 version, you probably need to do something about your drivers. And that's what one of the many things that we are capturing here in the service that we call CTGlobal Insight Analytics. So CTGlobal Insight Analytics is it's a service. The dashboard, as you see right here, resides in Azure. You don't need any Azure subscription at all. And the dashboard can visualize every single piece of information we have within SCCM. So that can be, how many active clients do I have? How many Windows upgrade have I done today? How many devices search will expire this week? All of this great insight that will allow me to be a little bit more proactive. If I look at my my blue screen of death here, then when I click on the widget, it will take me on premise. So because on premise we can show stuff like primary users, IP address, we can show everything because now we are on premise in your environment. So here I can go in and have a look and see, okay, so this user here, JGS, how many blue screens have this poor fellow here seen? And translating that, because if you go in and tell your boss that, hey, we have 1,000 blue screens, I need to allocate some resources, he or she will probably not understand it. But if we go in and we look at see where I have you, when we go in and translate that into something that they understand, then I have a little report here, and you can see I can just go ahead and select all of my clients. I'll go in and punch in a currency. So my boss understands dollars, and the cost per hour here, plus production and so on, is 150. So right now it's just taking all of that blue screen information and tells me, well, in your organization, in my small demo environment, I've lost 29 hours over the last year. That's a total cost of 4,300. And if my savings, if I go ahead and fix all of these top 10 blue screens, will be X number of dollars here. And by the way, the total count of blue screens in your environment has been 116. Now, these are relatively small numbers, because what we are seeing out there in the wild is thousands of blue screens, and not all of them can be addressed by upgrading your drivers during a Windows 10 servicing, but a lot of them can be addressed, and obviously also by closely monitoring this and then doing something about it. We do have a lot of questions, and trust me when I say I could talk for hours about this Insight Analytics here, because it's pretty unique, and it just helps us a lot when we go on site to our customers, because all of a sudden we can see things that are coming, and we can also quickly understand why do we have an issue over here. It's actually not because there's something wrong maybe with the WSUS, but it could be that there's something wrong with other parts of your patch infrastructure, maybe some of your group policy settings and so on and so forth. So a lot of great insights here, and this is just a minor portion of what we can deliver here. Now, Kim, I do know we are running a little short on time, and we have some questions. I don't know if any of you have had time to look at the questions.
Yeah, there's one question in there, Kent. Let's see here. Let me read it. As part of Autopilot enrollment, are you able to show where you can configure what policies are required before a user is allowed to start Autopilot?
So that's a good one. So going back here, and the short answer is no. But going back here, I have my deployment profiles, and I showed you that I have created a profile here called sales. Well, if I go ahead and create a new profile here, test is a good name. Then I can select what service that my device will join. And right now it will, be able to Azure AD join the device. And then I have my Ubi experiences. And in here, these are the policies that I can configure. Having said that, this is a service that is being, the whole Intune service is being updated, on a monthly basis. And if any of you are attending MMS within the next couple of weeks, all I can say is that look out for some changes there, because there will be some roadmap, and hopefully we'll also be able to see a sneak preview of some of the new stuff coming. But the answer to that one is no.
Yeah, so it's an interesting piece, kind of on tacking on real quick on Kent's last thing. We talked about challenges here, right? And we can whine and moan about some of them, and we do, right? And that's part of what we pointed out here. Here's some of the shortcomings. But at the same time, there's something new like every month. It seems like either maybe a new problem or there's new solutions. So all of the cloud stuff is evolving really rapidly. If you're doing Config Manager, it's evolving really rapidly as well. So we didn't really focus on new features because there's obviously some cool new features here as well. But keeping abreast of the new technologies, of the new things that Microsoft is doing, is going to help us address these challenges. And so you have to do it, right? That is a challenge in and of itself, keeping up with these kinds of things. Okay, sorry, small aside there. Let me go on to one of the other questions here. So which one?
There's a UI Plus question I can see for you, Jason.
Yep, I was going up in order, so let me get the one right before it, sorry. Which one is best suitable option for large-scale enterprises? WSUS and SUP in Config Manager, or WFB? WFB being Windows Update for Business. So without giving a whole lot of details and going too far off the tangent, we had an interesting session with the owner of WFB at the MVP Summit just a couple of months ago. And I think the answer from Microsoft maybe 6 months, even a year ago, was WFB for everybody, WFB rules. And I think that answer's changed from Microsoft perspective. And it's changed from, I don't know if it's changed from my perspective, but it's definitely not what you might expect there. Or maybe it is because I'm very biased, but it's Config Manager for enterprises. Enterprises don't want to give up control. Kind of like I alluded to though before, right? The intent here is, hey, we're patching the 200 million, whatever that number is, like I said, consumer devices, and we're doing it pretty well. That being, we being Microsoft, right? They're doing it via Microsoft Update. Why can't we do that for enterprises? The other flip side of that is, we enterprise, this is something, a burden for us to do every single month, or potentially more, right? Every now and then there's out-of-band patches. We have to go and approve things. We have to keep track of things. Why can't Microsoft just do this for us? There's lots of caveats in there, right? That's a very generic statement, so just take it at face value for right now. But in and of itself, that's kind of the question that it comes down to. So if you're small, born in the cloud enterprise, WFB's great, right? We don't want to have to manage this stuff. Just let Microsoft do it for us, and that's the intent there. If you're a bigger enterprise where your security guys really let that happen, can you give your managers a warm fuzzy that you're actually patching everything everywhere? Your CIO, those type of folks whose reputations are on the line because they're putting their names on things, and they're the owners at the end of the day. I think the answer for most organizations is probably no. They want that control. They need that control. And even though it's a burden, even though there's some work involved with it, particularly with the pain of WSUS, it's still something that most organizations will choose to do. So better is definitely, there's degrees of better there, but I do think it's better as long as you keep on top of things.
Okay, another question here, and that's about driver management and WSUS, because in WSUS we have the driver update category, but we don't really use that within Configuration Manager. Within Config Manager, you can go ahead and deploy your Surface drivers, but I think the question is more like, how do we do this in the real world? And deploying the latest version of a driver is not necessarily always the right thing to do. We have seen that, numerous times where a new wireless driver is actually, giving us issues that we didn't have in the past, and so on and so forth. So what we are doing here internally is we deploy them using a task sequence and a custom PowerShell script. So I know we are really running low on time here, but Let me see if I can just quickly go in and check this, because I do have, so you should have it here. If I just do search for me. So this is really what it comes down to. So I have a list of all my different devices there, and then I have a PowerShell script that will go in and update the drivers. And this script here will look at the drivers that we have on that specific device. It's going to create a log file saying, hey, this is what we had before, going to update the drivers. And that can also be an older version of the driver. And then it's going to write a nice log file and say, hey, this is what we have after. But this is kind of how we use this. So we don't use the driver stuff within WSUS.
Okay, cool. Let's see here. There's two tool ones. So the tool you showed, I think the intent is ultimately to make something available. Is that a true statement, Kent? That's one of the questions. The Windows Update deferral. Hey, you've got Windows Update happening tool.
Yeah, probably not. So that's still being implemented at customers. So yeah, somehow and somewhere, but it's being evaluated right now. But it's kind of neat. Helped us a lot.
So I guess there's some proprietary pieces in there. So it might not be released full open source or anything like that, or for free, but there may be some form or fashion that is released in.
Yeah.
Maybe for pay at some point.
Reach out to us.
The question on UI++ is, can it be run outside of WinPE? And answer is absolutely yes. The problem always with task sequences of running anything interactively is because of the system context and the session 0 desktop. So you still need to use the tool from UDI. Was it Service UI? I can't remember the name of the tool now. I never remember the name of the tool, but there's a tool in UDI that allows you to inject a UI onto the interactive user's desktop, even though it should be showing up on that hidden desktop. It's called Service UI, I'm pretty sure. So you still have to use that because it's kind of a security barrier that tool kind of violates, but it's really the only known way. Not that you couldn't roll your own, but there's some pain involved with it. So totally can be done.
Yeah. So, and then I think this one is for you, Jason. Do you think Intune fully replaces Config Manager after 5 years?
Yeah, I think I kind of alluded to that. I don't think so. I think Intune is going to have a place. I don't think it's going away. I think there's valid uses. And co-management is the way forward right now, really, for Microsoft. That way, they're not necessarily making you choose all or nothing, right? You saw the sliders that Kent showed. You can pick and choose which functionalities make sense for you to use in the different places. And it allows you to support the road warriors, does everything.
And the funny thing is, when we look at the numbers, the number of Config Manager clients, it's actually increasing month after month. So when once in a while, Microsoft will send out a blog post with some updated numbers. So it's, I totally concur with you, Jason. I don't think it's going away.
Here, when you move to a new OS every 6 months, are there suggestions around the quality checks, what they should look like? And I guess you alluded to that in the tool that you showed there, Kent. I wouldn't say there's anything specific out there. There's things like that are good things to check, like, are you on battery, right? We don't want to start an upgrade if you're not on battery. Are Wi-Fi, right? You don't want to be on Wi-Fi necessarily because it's going to take dog forever to do. And so those are some basic checks. Those are always been there for OSD. But then there's also kind of Windows 10 checks, right? Are your applications compatible? Particularly like your antivirus. Do you have third-party full volume encryption running? Those types of things. And that's really what Windows Upgrade Readiness is all about. It's a totally free service, so it's really hard to tell anyone to do anything else except for to go use Windows Upgrade Readiness.
And a lot of those checks you can carry out on the client without starting the upgrade. So be smart about it. Carry out the checks that you wanna. Get the results back to Configuration Manager, and then create your deploy collection based on that feedback. So if a client doesn't pass the check, there's really no reason for you to deploy the task sequence to that client, because then that client will just end up having a really bad experience. Start it up, download the content, just to, to figure out that, hey, I have an older version of Symantec antivirus or something like that. So, so be smart about it. I'm pretty sure, Jason, we can do a full webinar, just talking about how to prepare for a Windows 10 migration. Maybe that's even a topic there.
Yep.
So I think we lost Kim though.
Yeah, I think she got cut off a while ago, but that's okay.
Okay.
There's one final question, and it's about WFB, that it will set your machine to non-compliant. And I think it's a kind of a bigger statement there. And it's not so much about WFB, it's about how the clients report their compliance. And so if they're using WFB, they're not sending their compliance to Config Manager. They're actually using WFB to do that. It's actually called dual scan. There's been lots of talk around dual scan. It's not necessarily an inherent WSUS problem. It's more of a Windows problem, or challenge, if you will, as we've been calling them here. And basically, dual scan, kind of what it sounds like, was meant to be able to use, well, let's use Windows Update for Business, but let's still scan against our local WSUS server for like third-party patches. That was the intent. Unfortunately, sometimes the intents don't actually make it to reality, or they miss things. And in this case, dual scan did miss things, and that was sending that compliance to Config Manager. And so it's still a true statement, right? It's kind of it's one or the other at this point in time. Either you're sending your compliance to Config Manager, or you're sending your compliance to WSUS or WFB. And it is what it is at this point in time. There are some new integrations where you can use WFB directly in Config Manager if that's your choice. And I think it will actually start sending the compliance information there now. That was new as of 17.10. I don't think I've tested that, but in general, most people haven't done that. Have you seen anyone try to do that, enable WFB within Config Manager, Kent?
No, not without that being a mistake.
Yeah, exactly. So it's something to potentially stay away from, or at least test in your lab first, right? Like I said, those are new configurations in 17.10 to enable WFB directly within Config Manager. I would hope, once again, I haven't tested that because no one's really wanted to go down that path, but I would hope that that would also send the compliance information locally as well. Because at the end of the day, it's the Windows Update agent doing all the scanning, right? There's no different component on the client itself. You're just pointing the client to one of those different sources. So where does that client then send the compliance information is the question. And that's what dual scan was all about as well. So you would hope that if we enabled WFB within Config Manager, that it would also then gather the compliance info. Unfortunately, I don't have a definitive answer. It's something I think we'll follow up on because it's a great question, and we'll make sure that we post the answer out there.
Yeah. So for those of you who are interested in working more with the dashboard that I showed you, you can definitely sign up for a free trial. You can also watch out for future webinars, because we will do a couple of webinars only on data visualization with Configuration Manager and Intune, where our Insight Analytics play a crucial part here. But I have the link, and we will also be sending out the link to register for the trial. And with the trial, you will get full access. You'll be able to see all of your data within minutes after. And we're not just sending your data to Azure. It's all encrypted, and we're only sending out the results. So if you can see the screenshot here we'll be sending out like 100%, 37%, and so on and so forth. But watch out. We'll host a couple of webinars on that. And then I think that was the final question, right, Jason?
Actually, we got two more that can be answered relatively quickly. They just popped in. So is CTGlobal Analytics for Win 10 only and not Win 7? The answer is it's not for either, really. It's for Config Manager. At now, although there are more pieces being added, today it's about sucking data out of Config Manager and presenting that in the dashboard. So whatever Config Manager can manage. So if you have Windows 7 in there, if you have Mac OS in there, although I think Mac OS is being deprecated, as is Linux, which is also being deprecated. But if you happen to have those in there, we'll show you that information as well. Or at least the information will be available based upon how you've customized the dashboard. And then the final question that just popped in was, is it safe to manually decline updates? Absolutely. And so let me finish the statement. Is it safe to manually decline updates in WSUS, the WSUS instance that Config Manager is using? So absolutely. As I noted real quick before, that simply culls them out of the update metadata. so that the clients no longer get that. It is a reversible process. It takes a little bit of doing. It's really not that difficult. It is reversible. So if you happen to decline something that you really shouldn't have, you can get it back. But there's scripts out there, like I mentioned. It's in one of the blog posts. Microsoft actually started doing this and telling everyone to do this, and decline all your superseded updates, because WSUS doesn't do this by itself. So now all those superseded updates, and if you've ever looked how many superseded updates you have in your database, if you've had it around for a while, your WSUS database, it's a lot. It's usually around 33% of the updates are superseded in most organizations. That's a huge chunk, right? So if you have 12,000 updates, you're talking 4,000 updates that are superseded, and all that metadata then gets downloaded to every client. So there goes our big violet Beauregard, right? It keeps getting bigger and bigger. And so Itanium updates are the same. Whoever has deployed Itanium updates, I've never seen anyone do it. And then the new one, those version next updates, right? There's only a few of them, but their metadata is huge, and so they compound the problems as well. That was it, I think, at this point. So we have one open question, really, was making sure that we know what's going on with WFB and that setting. It's really about the new setting in 1710 and beyond. So
okay.
But other than that, yep.
Well, thanks a lot for attending. And those of you, if you have any other questions, please feel free to reach out to Jason or me. We will also be sending out information about where you can find the recordings. Jason and I will also be at MMS coming up in just about 2 weeks, I think it is, and we will have a whole team of colleagues at MMS. So we'll have a booth. Please make sure you stop by. And me personally, I'll almost stay in the States because I have a class coming up in June together with Johan Arvedmark, and if you haven't signed up for that, I think there are still a couple of seats left. And with that, thanks a lot for attending.
Thank you, everybody. Have a good rest of the week and a good rest of the day if you're here in the US.